You think you want to dive into the homesteading life, right? You think you want to get yourself some pigs, some chickens, some cows, some goats, some sheep, some water buffaloes. You did know you want some water buffaloes, right? Because you do. Right, Blue? You probably think that you just want to sell everything, quit your job, and start a homestead. Don't do that. If you want to run away from everything and dive in the deep end of homesteading, it's really exciting, but that's not what we think you should do here at Homesteady. In this video, we're going to talk about why that's not what you actually want to do, what you should do instead, and I have a warning for any of you dreamers who are looking to take the leap into the deep end. Hello everybody, this is Ask Homesteady. If you would like to have a question answered by us, hashtag Ask Homesteady, and if we find it in the comments and we think we can give you a good answer, well, we'll try. Hopefully today I have a good answer for Mr. 002. I'm gonna call him 002 because he has that in his username and makes him sound like a secret agent, which is always fun. He says, just stumbled upon this channel, very inspiring. Love that. It seems like you guys have a lot of expensive equipment as well as pay for a lot of materials that many are forced to create themselves from scratch. Do you have any videos on how the common person with little money can comprehend taking a dive like this without financial assistance? 002 is right. If you just stumbled across Homesteady and you look at what we have to work with right now, you're thinking, wow, very inspiring, but not what the everyday common man has. How can somebody who's just a beginner, a dreamer, dive into this life without all that? That is a fair question. Now, the next part of 002's comment, he says, the part that is stunting my girlfriend and I is leaving our business behind with no business plans to move forward. We have the entry money, but even to afford a $10,000 case tractor and a decent sawmill would mean running out of money before even breaking ground. We know that part of the challenge is to just believe that it will work out when the numbers on paper prove it's not even possible. I love 002's excitement. Him and his girlfriend have a big dream, and here at Homesteady we are all about encouraging you to chase that homestead dream and make it happen. But I have some good advice of how to go about that 002, and I also have some warnings for you what you don't want to do. Also, I have to go and check on my sheep, which are up on the hill. I got to make sure that they have water. They're in one of our remote pastures. So we're going to jump in what is a expensive piece of equipment and most homesteaders are not going to have access to, and we're going to go do some work up on the hill. I'm going to talk to you about how over the years we've gotten to the point where we have stuff like this to use, even though it's not really ours, and tell you a little bit about our story. 002 has just stumbled across Homesteady, so he doesn't know about Homesteady from the early days, back before we were managing a couple 100-acre family farm. He doesn't know that we started in a third-story apartment. That's where our homesteading journey started. We were a lot like him and his girlfriend. We just had a big dream and we wanted to dive in. We didn't know how to do it. So let's get into a little Homesteady history segment.
This is Ost, the star of the Homesteady channel. Fully bedecked in flannel with a long flowing beard, he is the epitome of the hardcore homesteader. Fully equipped with tractors, hay elevators, UTVs, all the most state-of-the-art, fancy homesteading equipment, and this is the way it's always been.
Okay, so 002, you want to know how the common man with not a lot of money can make this dive into homesteading life. Let's rewind back, like 30 plus years. I grew up in town. We were on a very small little backyard, had the white picket fence around it, no livestock, no animals. I get called a city boy a lot on this channel, and it's not far off. I am pretty much at heart a city boy, or a town kid at least. I am not a country boy. The first time I got in this tractor, I was petrified and terrified. There's been a lot of parts of this homestead life that I am new to and have learned along the way. If you want to talk about the common man, I just grew up in town, and even when I became an adult and we got married and we first started our family, I was a guy who worked in construction. We lived in a 3rd-story apartment. I did not have a ton of money. I was a equipment operator. That made learning how to drive a tractor a little bit easier. I knew some fundamentals on how to run a big piece of equipment. It did not give me any head start in my homestead life or homestead dreams. In fact, being a construction worker made it really difficult for us to start homesteading. When my son was born, we wanted to feed him like good quality food, you know, organic, whatever. At the time, that's what we were looking into, but we just could not afford that on a construction worker salary and stay-at-home mom. Gotta check on the cow pasture here and see if I need to move them. We are rotationally grazing our cows. We have been rotationally grazing our cows and our livestock for years now. And one of the things that we've done a little bit different this year is instead of doing daily moves, very like high frequency moves, we're doing more like weekly moves. So we give them a section that will last them anywhere from 3 or 4 days to a week. It just works with work-life balance a little bit better, and we haven't seen too bad of an effect on the pasture. Here's the section that they've been in. It's really well grazed. They got a lot of the stuff that we want them to get. And you can see where we're going. It's way lush over there. So we're gonna move them today, give them a little bit more fresh pasture and keep the process going. So when you think about like being a construction worker, it's not really a great lifestyle for a homesteader because you have to be away from your homestead a lot. We were in our 3rd-story apartment and we wanted to get our kid better quality food, but we were pretty broke and we couldn't afford like fancy organic food. We could have dove into the deep end. We could have like left everything behind and trust fallen into getting an off-grid property and starting a homestead. And we actually had talked about starting a homestead kind of from scratch back then, maybe putting up like a yurt, which is pretty low cost to get started and have something up quickly. And what we did, instead of just diving into the deep end, we went to the shallow end and we took one step into the world of homesteading.
So what does a step into the shallow end of the pool of the homesteading world actually look like? It's different for everybody. For me, I learned how to hunt. Remember, I grew up in town. I never ever held a gun or a bow or an arrow. I never butchered anything. So this was a small step in the direction of self-sufficiency, but a huge leap for me. And at the same time I was doing this, Kay was taking her own small steps into the world of homesteading. For her, that was starting a garden.
The cows, see, I'm moving them. They're excited. They're coming out for some feed. So we started where we were. We didn't do any huge deep leap. We just started exactly where we were, which was a 3rd-story apartment. And we learned a ton. Whoops. We learned a ton from those endeavors. Like, some people don't think about hunting as like technically homesteading. I do, but a lot of people don't even hunt who homestead. And sure, I learned how to hunt. I learned how to like stalk a deer, you know, find where a deer would be, and I learned how to shoot a bow and arrow and make the shot. But in addition to that, I also learned how, I didn't have any land at the time. I got access on other people's land. So I learned how to get access to free land to use. That is a skill that is huge for someone who wants to start but doesn't have any land yet, or doesn't even have the money for land. I also learned, once I got my first deer, how to butcher a large animal. That's not an easy thing to do. After we had all this meat, then we had to learn how to preserve that meat, how to vacuum seal and put it in the freezer and keep it, how to use it in recipes. So many different skills that could be applied to my future homesteading life here and even other places that we've been, all from that first little step into the shallow end of the pool. At the same time, Kay took a step into gardening, and through that garden, she learned not only how to plant vegetables, garden, right? She learned about soil. That's a huge thing. Right now, we're rotationally grazing these livestock, and the way we would amend our garden bed we took the principles of just amending a garden bed and adding to that soil and making it better. That's what we do out here in our pasture. Out here we're using the animals to amend the soil and build better pastures every year. She learned how to put up a harvest. She learned how to can and dehydrate, vacuum seal, freeze dry, all the different ways that you put up your produce. All skills that could be applied to our future life in a bigger homestead and in bigger adventures. So that's our first step. Just start where you are. Just where you, 002, wherever you and your girlfriend are right now, start doing something. Ay, ay, ay. Well, this turned into a huge mess. That's another reason you don't want to maybe dive in the deep end so fast. Not always as idyllic as it seems. I got a huge tangle on my rotational grazing equipment here, so I got to fix this. It's super frustrating and annoying. I hate when this happens. These step-in posts are not the kind I like to work with. They're good for a purpose, but rotational grazing is not that. And we had to use them because we were short on our favorite post. And well, I hate them. So I got to get rid of them. I got to actually pull these up and stop using them and get some more of my favorite posts, which are the blue step-in posts that Ken Cove makes. Let me get the one over here that's stuck and untangle this, and then we'll talk about stuff. It's interesting when you watch YouTube. It's interesting because, you know, if you're a big YouTube watcher, when you get started in this homestead thing, it can seem like everybody just does the big leave it all behind and run away to country life, because that's what makes a YouTube channel popular, right? Not a lot of people want to watch somebody who lives in a third-story apartment like do a little garden and try to can that. So a channel like that's not going to get a lot of views usually. What's going to get a lot of views is I sold everything and bought an off-grid property, or I left my life in the city and ran away off-grid. That is interesting and exciting, and it's fun to watch, and it makes good YouTube, but it represents this life like that's the way most people do it, and I don't think that's the way most people do it. And actually, I asked our Instagram community to chime in on this because I wondered, what do most people do? So I asked on Instagram. If you don't follow us on Instagram, just search Homesteady Show. I asked on Instagram, how did you start your homestead? Do you dive in the deep end, or did you go slow and steady? And are you happy that that's the way you did it? And let's see, so far, and we're gonna keep watching this poll as we do this video. So far, 75% of people said, I went slow and steady and I'm glad I did. Mind you, this is not a lot of people so far. We'll watch how this changes. That is the way that we built our homestead life. We went from that third-story apartment, we got some skills, and then we went down into the next step in the shallow end, right? We went from step 1 to step 2, which was, okay, we learned some skills and we did what we could in our third-story apartment, but eventually we wanted to have some property and do the homestead farm thing. But we didn't go and buy a farm. That would have been a dive into the deep end. Instead, we found a little property with a little bit of acreage, and it was just a family home that had potential to be turned into a little farm with some elbow grease and a little bit of cheating. We cheated. Let me tell you how we cheated. But first I got to get this fence up, because eventually the bull is going to figure out that the fence is down and he's going to want to come where I am. And like I said, I'm just a city boy at heart. I don't really want the bull working in this paddock with me. It's better to keep him separate. Okay, I think I got that tangle taken care of. It was super annoying, but a lot of times the unexpected happens on the homestead. And we'll get to that a little bit later and why one of my warnings for you has to do with the unexpected happening with your homestead dreams, because sometimes your unexpected is a tangle in the fence, and sometimes it's a lot worse. So now let's talk about how we cheated on that farm property. Well, I worked with my father's construction company. So when you're turning a property that isn't a farm into a farm, there's some pretty good projects that having access to big equipment, fancy equipment, can really make easier. Whoop. And yeah, you know, I wasn't afraid to say, hey Dad, can I this weekend borrow the excavator? Can I borrow the loader? We're gonna put in some gardens, or we're gonna put in a pig pen, or we're gonna rebuild. My dad's a carpenter. Hey Dad, will you help me, teach me how to rebuild this old fallen down barn? So like, yeah, to someone who doesn't have access to heavy equipment, like you said in your comment there, 002, yeah, that's a cheat. That's a cheat code. But here's the thing. Everybody's got a cheat code. Not the same cheat code, but everyone's got one. So look at you guys. You said in your comment, you and your girlfriend have a business. You have your own business. A lot of people don't. That's a cheat code, right? So you're your own boss. You get to call the shots, which means maybe instead of working a normal 9 to 5 when you first get started, you take a day off a week, bank your hours in on the other days, and take a whole day to spend working on a property, learning some skills, getting in, you know, slow and steady. That way, take advantage of that. Maybe do you have family members that have connections? Do you have whatever your cheat code is? Comment below. Those of you who are watching, what was your cheat code when you got started homesteading? You know, what unfair advantage did you take advantage of? Did you have friends or family? Sometimes people look down on like, oh, well, you know, his dad has equipment, or he went to college, so he's got a high paying job. The fact is, you know, we all have our cheat codes and we all have our struggles too. So take your struggles with your cheat codes and figure out, what do you guys have a good hard talk, you and your girlfriend, and figure out, what are we not thinking of? Who do we know? What connections do we have? What skills? Our own business, how can we change that and use that to get further along? Because that can be a big difference if you're not afraid to use those cheat codes, and you can figure out which ones to use and which ones maybe not to use. We grew a lot on that homestead. We wound up actually starting a small farm business. And then we got our first one of those, cows. And at that point we realized we were outgrowing that family farm. We just didn't have enough pasture and size to grow out a herd of cattle. And it was something that we really liked and wanted to do more of. But we still didn't make a complete dive into the deep end. Even here, this didn't happen quickly. We didn't dive into this. When you watch Homesteady now, most of our videos take place here on our family farm, which we're managers. And just a brief little history about this family farm. My kids are the 5th generation to be on this family farm. It was purchased for a whopping $1,000. Kay's great grandfather purchased it. It was a hay farm, and they did hay. It is co-owned, not at all by us. It's co-owned by the generation before us. It's a large property to manage, especially because nobody is a full-time farmer. Some of Kay's family has livestock on the one side here, and then we took over Kay's dad's side, this property that he manages. We manage a lot of that now. Not all of it, he still is involved in some of it, but we do a lot of the management. And that's why, 002, when you see a fancy tractor like this, your common construction worker in the 3rd story of apartment could not have this piece of equipment, still wouldn't to this day have been able to get a tractor like this. It is something that came with the management position on the family farm that's been here in generation after generation. And so now, yes, we are very fortunate we have access to a property like this to run our livestock herd on. The things we do own and we have invested our own money in and built up over the years. And we just did that little by little, slow and steady. one foot into the deep end at a time. Let's check on the sheep while we're up here. See how they're doing. Hello, sheepies. And that brings me to my first big warning for you, 002, and anybody else who's a dreamer, who's thinking about going about it this way. You mentioned in your comment, we know that part of the challenge is to just believe that it will work out when numbers on paper prove that it's not even possible. I did not come to this family farm for probably, maybe it was about 5 years. My father-in-law, pretty much as soon as we started growing our first farm, my father-in-law said, hey, if you guys like the animals, why don't you come and do the farm thing and manage the family farm? And he asked for years and years and years. And I always said no, because if we came here, even with all our livestock and all our experience up until that point, we still would not have been able to pay the bills and make a living that would support a family of our size. It did not make sense on paper. The numbers didn't work out. So I said no. For years, we just stayed where we were, where it was working. But as we grew our farm, we realized we did want to manage more property. We did want to run a cattle herd, which we couldn't really fit at our property, our first family farm. So the dream was there. The hope to be in the deep end where we are now was there. Is that grease or poop? Grease. But we didn't leap because it didn't look good on paper. And that's my first warning to you. If it doesn't make sense on paper, you know, not everything, you can't predict the future and everything's not going to be perfect. If you can figure out how 80% is going to work, you could trust fall into 20%. And I'll talk about how that happened in a little bit for me. But if it's not checking out on paper at all the dreams and hope in the world. I'm an idealist, I get it. I have those dreams and I want to dive in the deep end. And you've seen here on, if you've watched, well, you're new to Homesteady 002, but a lot of people have watched us do some pretty big leaps over time. That very first time I let that arrow fly at that deer, not knowing how to butcher it, that was a dive into the deep end. And the first time we got livestock, that was a dive into somewhat of a deep end, and getting our first farm and farm business up and running. Those were dives, but every dive into those deep ends, there were floaties. Every time there was a way to make sure that we would not be financially or emotionally kind of ruined if things didn't work out. And we've done that pretty much every step of the way with our journey. You know, when we started our farm business, our very first farm, I didn't quit my job. I had a full-time job, paid all the bills. I had multiple side hustles. I interviewed my grandfather who grew up on a dairy farm years and years ago, and he's passed away since. But I love this interview and I cherish it. I watch it once in a while just because I have a little bit of a piece of him still lives on. And he hated farm life.
One of the things that really stick out in your mind about all those years on the farm.
Not getting a day off is what sticks in mind.
There must have been something.
You started at 5:30 in the morning. You did 2 hours work before breakfast. You did the chores like that.
Because of your breakfast, you enjoyed that breakfast.
Then you had breakfast at like 7 o'clock. And after breakfast, you went to clean the stalls for the cows, and the cows went into the pasture. You cleaned the barn, where the cow barn's called, you know, where the trough is, the manure trough and all this kind of thing. And then you went out in the field and started your regular day's work at 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And you were out there till 4:30. The chores were until 6 or 6:30. You ate supper, or dinner, or whatever you want to call it, at 7 or 6:30, 7 o'clock. Then after that, you went into the vegetable garden until it got dark.
Oh, man.
He
left the farm at 17 and never looked back. And his advice to people who had a farm dream was, if someone was thinking about, you know, they're saving up their money, they're going to buy a piece of land, quit their job and just do it full time, what would your warning advice be? What scale would you recommend someone should try it at?
I wouldn't recommend it at all.
No, Austin, I would do, don't give up your day job. Right. Take the year, no, not just 1 year, maybe 2 years, and see how it goes. Find out what's your best resale. Is it going to be cabbages or cauliflower? Or?
Try it for a couple of weeks before you decide it's not
No,
for
you. Gotta
you.
give it
What is even this for?
Don't quit your day job, because you might actually hate it. You probably won't, but you might. A lot of people love this when they go back to the land and learn it, but some people don't. So don't quit your day job. My grandfather's advice to you there. We didn't quit our day job, even with the farm business and growing it over time. And then eventually we started this business of Homesteady. And even with that, that's how we eventually wound up here. I started Homesteady, which was at the beginning just a podcast. I was able to podcast about homesteading in the early morning hours before I drove to my construction job. And over time, the business, the podcast grew. Then we started this YouTube channel and that grew. And eventually I had about, 50-50 of our income was starting to come from Homesteady, but I still had a lot of income coming from my job. And I had to make the decision, do I go all in on Homesteady? I was not making 100% of my income from Homesteady when we switched over to doing Homesteady full time. But I knew that we could survive making that leap with floaties on. We already had a steady income. And even when I did that, I picked up some side jobs. I was running my YouTube channel now, so I helped some companies and some people run their own YouTube channel, which allowed me more freedom than a construction job. I had to commute way less, and I could pay for cameras and computers and the things I needed to do Homesteady with the revenue I got helping other people out. So it was constant steps down deeper and deeper and deeper into the deep end that you now see here. And as we continue on in our journey, going into off-grid building, the Sunny Mountain project that we started a couple years ago, our Alaska off-grid adventure, even still, these big things to a newcomer might seem like we dove in the deep end and trust fall, but really the whole time it's been a controlled descent, and when there was a little bit of a jump, we had floaties on. That's our story. Let's talk about 002 and all you other dreamers out there who want to dive into homestead life. It seems like you and your girlfriend are talking about doing like an off-grid build from scratch, kind of like we've been thinking about doing over the last couple of years over at Sunny Mountain. And I love that. That is such an awesome dream, and that's so exciting. And I don't at all want to discourage that goal. Hello. I do want to discourage you from getting goats. Don't bother with goats, skip that one. But the other stuff I think you should try for. So what can you and your girlfriend do now? How can you start now? And any of you watching who are dreamers, ask yourself, how can you start where you are and then keep shifting and changing things slowly over time to grow and grow and grow? Think about the things you're gonna need when you do finally someday get a piece of raw property to develop an off-grid property. You're gonna need a couple things that are very important. You're gonna need, this is in my opinion, some people do it without this, but this is my opinion. You're gonna need experience in homesteading. You're gonna need experience in building. You're going to need funding, a way to pay for this project, because it always is gonna cost more than you expect. And the one other thing you're gonna need, I'll save that for the end because that's a really important one that a lot of people don't think about. Right now, whatever you do for work, wherever you are, what can you do to get some experience? The sheep always love playing with the tractor. Think about, can you go and find a community garden somewhere and start just doing some basic gardening? Can you start working on some kind of building projects? Even if you live in the city, maybe you got a driveway and maybe you start, build some chicken coops and sell them. Start a little side hustle building chicken coops. Trust me, there's a lot of people who have a farm or a homestead who don't have time to build another chicken coop, but they need another chicken coop. Start getting some skills now. Those skills will start to cascade. You can make a little bit of money, have a little savings account from the things that you've done. Like we did early on our little farm, we started selling pork, and that helped us make a little bit of money and save a lot of money. Do you want to have livestock? Are you going to want to butcher that livestock? learn to butcher. You might think, well, how am I going to do that living in the city? It's actually not so hard. Go to your local butcher shop and buy primals. Those are the huge cuts. Buy quarters of a beef and learn to break it down in your kitchen. Trust me, once you learn how to break down a quarter, butchering the whole animal is going to be a lot easier. Volunteer at a farm. Find farms that are doing butcher days. Learn to butcher chickens. Let's see how our poll is going back at Instagram. Let's see. What are people saying? Ooh, we got some more votes here. Still, it has changed. It's down to 53% say they started slow and steady and they're glad they did. 20% dove in the deep end and glad they did. 20% dove in the deep end, wish they had gone slower, so there was some regret there. And only 7% went slow and steady and wish they hadn't. So interesting how this is shifting and changing.
I actually ran this poll back at our YouTube channel, and out of 470 people who have started homesteading, 300 of them have started slow and steady and are glad that they did. That was by far the majority. There was also some fantastic comments, like Seize the Dave. He said, I started with chickens and made my way to adding pigs, then got a dairy goat to add milk to my production. However, I did not have infrastructure and finances in order beforehand, and it stressed us out financially and mentally, taking care of everything trying to make it work. His advice was, figure what you can do, then divide it by 2 so you don't overstretch yourself. Magnolia Grove Homestead, who just built a really beautiful goat shelter, and you can see that on their YouTube channel, says, I dove in headfirst and did a lot of things too fast. Number 1 was planting and building things in the wrong locations. I've moved my in-ground garden 3 times. My orchard has died twice due to poor location, and the third is still alive, but has to be moved this fall or winter. My chicken coop was too close to the house, my small goat barn in a spot that floods during hurricanes and tropical storms. My new barn, after being on the land for 6 years, is going in this fall. Lots of time and money wasted, but it took this long for me to see the patterns and pick the best locations for things. Tamakoa Homestead said, we are living a double life right now, so slow and steady it is. Living in a big town and using weekends and holidays to build up the land. I have learned so much about the land and I'm so incredibly happy we didn't stick to our original plans. Now, of course, it has to be said that not everybody thinks slow and steady is the right way to go. There was a small amount of people who took our poll who said they went slow but wished they had gone faster, and there was another small group of people who went fast and were happy they did. For example, Farmish, I dove in head first because I was excited to do it before I had good systems in place. It made me learn very fast what systems are absolutely necessary and what aren't. I don't regret it at all. Nicole's Natural Path said, with my family's personality, slow and steady would not have worked. LOL. We dove in deep and have learned so much along the way. Fixed and adjusted as we went. Do whatever works for you and your family so you're comfortable and happy. I really liked what Compact Nation 2022 said. I was raised in the country, so it wasn't a big deal to jump in feet first. My girlfriend, on the other hand, is city, and it's taken her a while to get used to it. So my advice is weigh their background. What's good for me might not be best for you. That really hit home with me as a town kid. I'm glad we went slow and steady. I'm sure Kay could have gone a little bit more fast and furious because she was a country girl and all this stuff was stuff she was used to. In the end, there is no right way to do it. However, our poll did show that most homesteaders go slow and steady and are happy that they did. I'll have links below to everyone who is in this segment who had a YouTube channel. Go check them out, give them some love.
We talked about things you're going to need when you actually do start your off-grid homestead, and another one is funding. And that's where I think you guys do have a cheat code. Whatever your business is, you've already started a business, you have your own business, that's huge because that gives you a lot of freedom. Now, if it doesn't work with your dream of off-grid building, how could you shift it?
So I actually asked 002 what is his and his girlfriend's business because I wanted to get a little bit more information. And this is a just Awesome place for them to be starting. They do woodworking and jewelry, and they sell it through an Etsy shop. So what a fantastic place to start. Because you are already selling on the internet, you can do that anywhere. You could keep this business going to fund your homestead project. But not every dreamer can. You're gonna need some funding on your off-grid build. The thing is, we see on YouTube a lot, people are doing this off-grid life thing and you see them building every day. They're probably making a living from their YouTube videos. If they're a smaller channel and they're not getting a lot of views, then they probably have some source of income or revenue. Maybe they made some investments in life that are paying them off. Maybe they have partnerships with people that you don't even know. I make the bulk of my money here through my YouTube channel, but I have other sources of income that I don't really talk about on this channel much. Just side jobs I do and projects in the audio video world. And I could fund other projects that you would see and you wouldn't even know about it. So when you watch a channel and they just run off into the woods and start building, if they have a lot of views, well, then they're making a living from their YouTube views probably. And if they don't, well, who knows? Good for them. They don't owe anybody an explanation, but don't try to mimic something that you don't understand. And so if you guys want to run off and do this project, you're gonna need a source of funding. Establish that now. Those are your floaties. Jump in the deep end once your floaties are full of air and you know, even if it doesn't work out, you'll be able to get out of the deep end and go back somewhere where you're happy. Because that is the other warning I have for you. Things go wrong. Unexpected stuff happens. You need to have, if you're gonna jump in a deep end, even with floaties, you do need to have a plan. If things go badly, you need to have an escape plan. This applies to any aspect of homestead life, right? We have a barn full of chickens over there. When I first got chickens, I didn't know if it was gonna work out. Having a exit strategy for chickens is not hard. You go on Craigslist, you say free chickens, and they're gone in a day. So it's not a big deal for some things, but if you're talking an off-grid property that you're going to develop from scratch, build a homestead, that, if you don't have a good exit strategy, that can wreck you. Doing this homestead thing, I have been shopping for homestead properties in different states for the last 15 years that we've been interested in homesteading. On and off, we're always looking for something. And I can't tell you how many properties, off-grid projects we found half built, where people went in, didn't understand the cost, ran out of money and gave up. And I can tell you, those properties are really hard to sell. Generally, a bank is not going to fund a half-built raw piece of property. So you're gonna need to find a buyer who has all the money they need to buy it from you. That's difficult. So if you don't have a good exit strategy, you can end up financially crippled, and that can affect you emotionally. It can affect your relationships. It's not a good idea to go all in without an exit strategy. So if you're going to do this, make sure you have a good exit strategy. As a lot of you know, me and Kay have been working on an off-grid build project. We're going on our second year of this project. And of course, before we got started in this, we needed to have an exit strategy all ready to go should things go bad, or should we change our mind? Because that's another thing you may find when you start homesteading and doing things. The dreams you have, you dream of starting a pastured pork farm, and then you realize you don't like the smell of pigs. And honestly, you don't like working with pigs. They're always breaking out and giving you a hard time and driving you nuts. Really, you like cows. So you shift, right? You pivot. Even if you don't give up on your dream completely, what it starts off looking like, it usually never finishes looking like. I wonder if people in the comments, this is gonna have a lot of good comments, I wonder if people in the comments could relate to that. Me and Kay, I mentioned earlier, I'm an idealist. We're both kind of idealists, and part of being an idealist is you have big dreams, you dream big dreams, and you're not afraid to jump in and give them a shot. And then sometimes your dreams, you realize, weren't exactly what you imagined, and so you decide you want to change that up. And we have changed so many things over the years. That's one of the things. We're not afraid to try something, and if we love it, double down, and if we don't love it, shift. You may find that your off-grid dream looks like this, and then it shifts. You know, if I had a suit and tie on, I was a financial advisor, that's some good advice I would give you. Make sure you have an exit strategy. I could hear Accountant Mike saying that. Make sure you have an exit strategy. If you're getting into an off-grid build, here's how we approached our
adventure foray into an off-grid build project, which has changed. We talked about that in the last couple of videos. We found a property that we knew wouldn't financially wreck us if we, got involved in trying to own this property. And then a property that would work for our life if we never did anything. If we decided the next day, you know what, we have access to this property, but we don't want to build on it, well, could we hunt and fish? Because I love doing both those things. So right away, it was a great hunting property, and we have been hunting, and it's only getting better with what we've done to it. So it worked in our life. If we wound up doing nothing, I still had a nice hunting property that I could feed my family from. We put a pond on it really quickly in the scheme of things, and stocked that with fish. So now it's a hunting and fishing property. And should we decide, you know what, we changed our mind, we're not going to build an off-grid homestead here, we're going to do something else, we could sell it as a hunting and fishing property with a nice road into it, open area, good sun, pond. There's a lot of things that a hunter, fisherman would want on that property. It's now more valuable than when we first found it. So going into a project and building it to have appeal where if you decide, you know what, I'm out, you're not going to take a financial hit. Whew, it is hot. I'm going to pull up a chair. Oh yeah, that's good. You just stumbled across our channel 002. You're inspired and you want to go and do this, and I think you absolutely should. But it might take years. It might take a decade. It might take more. And that's okay, because as long as you start and you keep taking these steps further and further in the pool, you'll be enjoying that. The learning and the adventure and the growth and the failure and the shifting and the changing. It's part of the fun. And it's cheesy to say, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And honestly, sometimes it is about the destination. Sometimes you just want to make that thing happen. But it doesn't mean you can't enjoy the process along the way, even if it's slower. We have always talked at Homesteady about it's in the name, Homesteady, slow and steady growth into your homestead life. I am sitting under a very large sycamore tree that is giving off wonderful shade. This was planted decades and decades ago by Kay's brother, and it's a huge tree now, right?
Trees are one of the most amazing producers on the planet. Every year, their roots dig down deeper and deeper into the earth, mining for nutrients and minerals. They pull these up and they give to the surface in the form of fruit for us to enjoy, seeds to ensure their future, and even as they slow down their production and their leaves fall, they're adding fertility to the forest around them.
Trees are one of the best examples to follow as a homesteader. So learn from the tree. Don't be afraid to grow slow and steady. It may be years before you start to bear fruit, but when you do, the winds that come and blow and shake, they may break a few branches, you might grow in a different direction, but you'll still be there growing. Here we are, 15 years of homesteading. What you got there, Bubby? We've changed a ton. So much has gone this direction and then that direction, and then so many failures, so many successes. We're still growing, we're still producing, and we're still really enjoying it. And I hope you and your girlfriend get to start on this journey and continue and enjoy the process, because it really is a wonderful life. The ring right around, okay? There we go. If you're wondering, okay, how do I start if I'm not diving in the deep end? We actually do have a course. It's called the Start Homesteading Today course. And you can take that course if you sign up to our email list. Click here to do that. It'll take you over to our website, join our email list, and I'll send you information how to start the Start Homesteading Today course, all about starting homesteading and how to do it today in the world that we live in.